Greetings, everyone. Pete Pardo here from Sea of Tranquility. Welcome to another episode of remembering our first episodes on Sea of Tranquility, as our favorites. And we've been trying to get everybody who has appeared across the channel over the last couple of years on at least one of these episodes. And the four gentlemen you see with me here today, this is almost like an extension of the UK Connection show. They're all from the UK. You know the time difference that we have between the UK and here in the States and North America. So it was really difficult trying to get. I wanted to separate all of them and put them on other shows, but it just made more sense to put them all together on one show. So here we've got with us today from Now Spinning Magazine, Mr. Phil Aston. We've got from the UK Connection and in the Prague seat, Mr. Stephen Reed from Scotland. We've got also from the UK Connection, Mr. Simon Bray and Mr. Andy Edwards, who's played drums with just about everybody you can imagine, as well as he has his own fine channel. So thanks for joining us, gentlemen. Hope you're all doing well. Great to see you all together for the first time. This is kind of fun for me. So as we've done with this particular show, which I believe we only have one episode left because we just have a couple folks here in the States who we haven't gotten on one yet. It's just to talk about the first ever time we appeared on Sea of Tranquility, what your memories are of that, whether it was a long time ago or more recently, as in Phil's case, and what your favorite episode that you participated in, right? So we'll start with Phil as our new guy on the channel. So Phil, why don't you we'll first talk about your first time episode, and we'll go one turn around, then we'll follow back up with you with your favorite. So
okay. As you say, I'm still very new to the channel, and I'm still very grateful for you having me on, Pete. So thank you. My first one was fully international, wasn't it? It was the one where there was myself, there was also Australia, and obviously Martin and yourself, where we looked at bands that were only technically well-known-ish in our own territories. I thought it was a great show. It was also very interesting because most of the ones I picked were also quite big in Australia. But that's as far away from me as you could possibly be. So technically at the time, I would have had no idea that was really going on when I was following bands like Slade and Status Quo, for instance. Pre-internet, obviously.
yeah,
But
exactly.
I really enjoyed that show. And in fact, it just helped me inspire. It must be the same for you guys as well. You talk about music, it reminds you of certain tracks and albums. Then you realize you haven't played that for a while, and then when the show ends, the first thing you do is go to your shelves and find one of those records and put it on. So that was obviously that was the first one. Loved it.
Yeah, that was an interesting one to set up too, because it's always challenging enough to set up a specific time when you've got folks in North America and in the UK. But then we had Peter Kerr over in Australia, and we're trying to figure, all right, how can we make this work? And I think, if I remember correctly, was that an early morning for us? I'm trying to remember when we actually. I think it was like 7 or 8 a.m. in the morning for me, early afternoon for you, and like 10 o'clock at night or the day
Yeah,
before, the
because
day after for Peter. I don't even remember. It was kind of
Yeah,
crazy.
because I did one with Pete soon after that, just me and him, and we did one on John Lord, and afterwards he said, "I'm going to bed now," so that's when I realised it must have been quite late for him.
Yeah, yeah. But that was a good one. That proved to be a very popular episode. So that was cool.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, Stephen, we'll move over to you.
Okay, well, I'm going to take us back into the midst of time because we've been doing stuff like this for a long time, Pete, haven't we?
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, many moons ago, I was just posting thoughts on music forums. We're like-minded people just talking music, and a friend that I made on those forums said that some place called Sea of Tranquility, which I'd never heard of, was looking for writers for doing reviews and things like that. So I sent off bits and bobs that I'd written to some random guy called Peter Pardo, who a few days later was kind enough to ask me to join the team. Lo and behold, a few weeks later, a box rammed with CDs arrived at my home, and my first review for the site went up on in August 2009. Band called Syzygy. How sad that I remember that, but there you go. So yes, I've been part of that ever-evolving team for nearly a decade and a half, 14 years now. And I must admit, I'm eternally grateful for it because it led to me joining Fireworks Rock and Metal, the print magazine here in the UK. I ended up there as assistant editor for a wee while. I was part of the crew at Firefest, interviewed loads of bands. I've reviewed hundreds, if not possibly thousands of albums in the meantime, all really through Sea of Tranquility. I've done liner notes for some CDs. None of this would have happened without being on Sea of Tranquility. So there you go. I have a big thank you to say to Peter for that, to be honest.
Thank you.
As far as joining the channel goes, well, Pete initially was putting up the videos on the homepage on Sea of Tranquility. And I was obviously adding my stuff to the website, and I would see him there and watch the videos and think nothing of it in terms of me ever appearing on the channel. It was just one of those things you think, that's not going to happen. And then Pete asked, and clearly I said no, which I did. I said no, I declined, and I declined for a while, to be fair. But Pete persevered. And I'm guessing that until May 2020, when I first appeared on the channel, my face was nowhere on the internet, ever. And that was on purpose, really, if I was to be honest. So the first show we did was ranking the albums of Magnum, where I was thinner than I am now, and clearly sitting in my eldest daughter's bedroom, which, contrary to popular belief, is this room. It just, you're allowed to decorate and change things, people. And I spoke very much like this about Magnum. And it's bizarre because I went back and watched a little bit of it the other day and I thought, wow, I'm so bad. And it's only got worse. But anyway, rather than hate it, I loved it. From there, we did some other kind of proggish album rankings. We did Marillion, we did Threshold, we did Arena, we did Fish. We did a 20 must-hear albums of UK progressive rock. And I would guess that those led Pete to ask me to join the In the Prog Seat team, which I'm still part of and love to be part of when I can. Time differences and various things aside, but I am still part of the team for those that think that I'm not. And then in June 2021, Pete asked if I'd be interested in doing a show with a fellow Sea of Tranquility writer and presenter, some really random guy called Simon Bray. And I believe the first one that we did was ranking the albums of Survivor. I think that's the first thing that the three of us did on the screen. And then we did a few more album rankings and various things like that, homework assignments, more of which later. And from there, things evolved into the UK connection. And we have been on the channel at least twice a month, every month, talking basically all types of nonsense ever since.
Yeah, how long has the UK connection been on now? Is it 2 years yet?
We've been appearing as a trio for just over 2 years. Where the UK connection formalised, I'm not sure.
Yeah, because we did a bunch of stuff together before we actually called it that, right? Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I think
just so everybody knows, Simon's
the UK connection, and it stuck.
It did. It totally did. Yeah. And it's funny, I'm sure Simon's going to talk about it, but I had the same challenge with getting Simon to appear on the channel as I did Stephen, because Simon's been also writing for the website as just almost as long as Stephen, if not longer. So I wanted to include both those guys. I'll turn it over to Simon. I don't want to steal his thunder and let him take it from there. But yeah, it was those are the two guys I wanted on desperately. And I'm like, why are both of them telling me no? What's going on here? Right? Go ahead, Simon.
I feel like that's not the case. I just ignored the first few emails.
Well, ignored, said no, it's the same thing. It's a rejection.
Straight into the bin. Well, what's all this YouTube shit? I'm not doing any of that. No, I just like to read things. Oh, how wrong I was. One thing I would like to say, I think I started writing for Sea of Tranquility in about 2011, 10, 11, around about then. I've never had a single physical product from you. Not one.
Well, I always ask everybody off the bat, you want physical or you want digital? And you're always like, digital's fine.
Can't imagine that world exists. There's a reason why I sit in this room. I'm not upstairs, so I can't look like you lot. just pleased that Andy sat in his front room, otherwise I'd be looking really pathetic, you know what I mean? Yeah, I did ignore the first few emails, very much so. Yes. With my usual lack of research, I've been unable to find my first one, and I have had Stephen on this, haven't I?
You have, and I failed as well, to be fair. So if the
Yeah,
viewers
I
know,
think I can only assume I was uncredited for my first appearance, but I do remember Pete saying something along the lines of, "You were a bit rubbish." I do remember you saying that. But I have looked at some of the earlier ones, which I thought might be the first. And first thing is, we've had a hair transplant, Pete. Yeah. God, what was
We
going
both
on there?
looked a little different back then. Yes, that is true. That is
There
true.
was at least a few episodes where I looked like a monk, which was very, very odd when I had a green hoodie, which is very odd. Anyway, the first one I actually remember was a ranking of Status Quo songs. And me being me, I just kind of threw it together. And my thought was, well, this is an American website, channel. You know, do I go really obscure, or do I go with the hits? What do the people know? So I thought I came up with the right decent mix. What is that? Is that me looking like a monk? I do look like a monk, though, don't
I believe this is the first one. This
I?
is why 38 Specials albums post 1986 are worth your time. That was 3 years ago.
You definitely say welcome back at the start of that. I have rewatched it.
So
I'm
I don't
sure
know
you
what
do.
I don't know what the other one is though. There's one. All right, so there's probably one before that. I don't know.
I think Peter's deleted it.
Yeah,
No,
I'm
I
sure
don't
Gary
think
Joyce
he
says
did.
welcome back, Simon. I'm sure he does in the comments. But anyhow, right, my point being that I thought to myself, status quo, you know, what should I do? And then in the comments, and I always do read the comments, which probably shouldn't do sometimes. It's get, well, Pete, Pete knows more than the fan. Oh shit, I pitched this wrong. I really, really have. So, then at that point you think, well, I'm going to put a little bit more effort into this, don't you? And one day, I promise you, everyone, I absolutely will do. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I thought that was the first one, but there is one before that. I don't know what it is. I will find it because I'm going to be on a mission now. But all right, the favorite will be the one to hear. Andy, we'll turn it over to you for your first time.
So I think my first time on the channel was when I was interviewed with John Jowett when the first Rain album came out. Obviously, and I think my awareness of Sea of Tranquility goes right back to it's got to be when I was in IQ. And I think that's why we contacted you, to do an interview. I was aware of the channel, and that was a lot of fun doing it with John. It was nice to bring John on. And but I'd become a big fan of the channel originally because I was trying to get my head round the Gentle Giant, and I'd come across you through the ranking of their albums, so it was lovely to get on the channel. And then you sort of got in touch and said you want to rank Stanley Clarke's albums. I thought that's brilliant, and I think that was my first time on the channel not being interviewed, but being involved in a ranking or something like that. And I thought, well, that'll be easy. And then of course I realized the job, that I know all the Stanley Clarke albums up until about 1982, and then there's about 50 after that, and I had to then sit down and go through all these Stanley Clarke albums. And the frustrating thing was, I remember thinking, the stuff he's done over the last 10 years is incredible. So I had to then, I couldn't just discount them, because often when you do the ranking, you get to the 80s albums, don't you? And you go, well, I don't know that album that well, but I'll just we pass over that. But yeah, that was a surprise to hear, how incredible Stanley's output has been over the last few years, But it was really enjoyable, but it's a little bit stressful, don't you think, guys? Especially when you first start, trying to take on a whole discography and trying to make sure every album, because them watching, they will know every album. It's
two words: Beulah Quo.
I'm not going to do
it. Good. I had to listen to it. That's enough.
Andy,
I watched that Status Quo one, and I found myself delving into the awful Status Quo albums for quite a long time. It was quite enjoyable.
Andy, did we do that Stanley Clarke? Was that with George LeMay? The three of us?
Yeah.
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 Okay. Yeah, that was a fun one. And we've actually done some really cool fusion ones that I'm sure maybe you'll mention in your second go around here. But yeah,
You've never got me to do any prog ones,
it's all
which is
been all fusion so
interesting.
far.
Yeah, it's all
I think by the time
fusion.
you started coming on the channel, we had done so many of the prog bands already. There was like not a hell of a lot left, other than the newer stuff, right?
Yeah.
More recent bands.
Do you find that hard now, Pete, that you're trying to find a ranking of bands? Because you've done every band.
Well, you know what it is? It's like I've done all the major bands. So I still have a huge list of bands I haven't done, but they're the more, the second, third tier, more obscure stuff. And I like doing that. But viewers, they want to see the ranking shows on all the big bands. Well, we've done all the big bands. So like there seems to be less of an interest in people watching ranking shows for bands they're not familiar with. But not from everybody, because there's a good portion of the audience that they thirst for new music and new bands, so they love those. But like whereas 3 years ago we do ranking the album shows of all the big guys, and 10 15,000 people would watch every episode, and now we're doing the more obscure stuff, and 2 3 4,000 people, right? Because that's what it is. People like to watch what they're familiar with, right? So it's always tough. But I mean, I'm trying to get to as many of the bands that I'm into as possible, whether they're major or obscure. So it's like, there's still plenty more to do. Plenty more to do.
I just did a video on Herman Zabel, that one album in 1976, and that was really successful video, even though that's possibly the most obscure, and it's sort of prog and fusion, but the story's so strange. And I got the guy that played bass on it, he got in contact and I got to talk to him. So sometimes when you delve into these super rare ones, I call it the mogul thrash syndrome.
It happens, right? You never know. You just never know. Cool. All right, let's circle back around. So Phil, your favorite video of the ones you've done so far?
I'm going to say the most recent one. I've not got that many in my catalogue with Sea of Tranquility, but the last one, Pete, where you chose the 10 guitarists, where we had to pick the best track that kind of represents them, has been my favourite so far, because your choices, some of them weren't that obvious. So just like you were saying about listening to lots of Stanley Clarke, Andy, when you were doing the ranking on it, one of the choices from Pete was Larry Carlton. And I got some albums, but when I looked, I thought, well, I'll just dip in and see what he's done. And I think as I got past page 12, I realized there was going to be a lot of listening involved. But I love that episode because I love that whole idea of just picking musicians and not necessarily picking an album, but picking a song that kind of is a trigger for people to explore that musician's back catalogue. So I really enjoyed that show.
Yeah, that was fun.
Useful, isn't it? Sorry.
Go ahead, Andy.
I say it's really useful. That's the most useful thing, because when you've heard of an artist and you don't know anything about them, you want to hear that one track, don't you? And it's like when somebody says, "Oh, I've never heard Gentle Giant," and you think, "Oh, which one shall I play them first?" And there's that thing of, we're playing that one that doesn't represent that, So it's a fascinating thing.
It's a really great show theme that Phil came up with. So it's what we do is, for those of you who haven't watched that yet, is each episode one of us picks 10 guitar players, and then when we do the episode, we have to each come up with one song that we feel best defines that guitar player and their style. So it's not about the most popular song or well-known song. It's not about the song with the best guitar solo or the best riff. But overall, if you were to say, just like Phil said before, if you were to go to someone and say, you should listen to this guitar player, and they're like, I'm not familiar with them, what's a good song to listen to? And you give them that song. And it's not easy at all for some of these guitar players, especially the ones that you know very well and you love so much of their stuff, to think of one song that really kind of speaks to you and gives not only myself, yourself, but hopefully to others, the best kind of example of what they're all about in one song. Right. So sometimes, Phil and I, we've struggled sometimes because, like, well, this one, it's all about the riff in this one. This is something in the solo. This is, the groove to it, whatever, or the tone, or it's not easy at all. And then to try and explain it on air, like why we've picked that. Right. That's probably the hardest part.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah. But it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Have you done any drummers yet?
No, No, that will be
We've just been doing
season
guitar
5.
players for now, but we may, you know, people have asked for us to do other stuff, you know. So
I'm available if you want to do drummers.
okay, that'll set up a whole other series,
Yeah.
right? So
Yeah.
songs that define a guitar player, songs that define drummers.
Yeah.
I'm sure
It'll be
bass players are on the
season
horizon.
4.
Yeah, that was a good one. That was a good one, Phil. I enjoyed that. That was a good one.
Yeah.
I'm sure we got
you.
many more to come. All right, Stephen, I'm curious to see what you've got.
Well, first off, I'm going to give a shout out to my favourite show on the channel, which I don't appear on, which is 4 Fusion Friday, which if anyone who knows me really well will be quite surprised by, because I don't really get on with Fusion very well, but that's why I like it. The show's formatted in such a way that I think you could, if you were into it massively, you would get a lot out of it. And if you're a newbie like me, and I've tried lots of albums on the back of watching the show, some are great, some are not, I may add. I find it really interesting, and I like the format an awful lot. We kind of have borrowed it for part of the melodic rock show that we do. So with yourself and George and Eric, and I know that Andy's been on it as well. That's a shout out to that, because if you haven't watched it, you should. Don't be put off by the Fusion tag if you don't like Fusion. I love the show. But anyway, so the obvious choice, and hence I'm not going to go with it, it has to be the first prog albums We Can't Stand show. You know, we had Lewis calling from the hospital, bandaged up, no explanation as to why. And then George went and basically trashed every classic prog album that's ever been released. I mean, it was
my favourite Sea of Tranquility show. George is just at his peak on that one, and he it just keeps on giving. That show does.
I think it helps that George, his kind of default setting is deadpan. So as King Crimson are being burnt to the ground, you just look at me and you go, there's no humour involved here, but there is loads. You know, it works so well. But yeah, that should be the favourite. But there you go. I've enjoyed some of the large kind of panel album rankings that I've done with the Cheap Trick and Tom Petty at kind of the turn of the year. Well, lots of people have never been on screen before. They were lots of fun. My favourite one probably from the UK connection is probably prior to the UK connection, because I really did enjoy the bottom 10. I think we were slightly more politically correct of Status Quo. I really enjoyed the Abula Bula Quo show. I really did. I really enjoyed that. It was lots of fun. But really, I'm going to highlight the homework assignments that myself and Simon did, because I have to take my hat off to Uncle Simon, really, because I mean, the first one we did, I gave him, was it On Mioza that I gave you, Simon, who are a Japanese band, and it would be fair to suggest that every song on the album, bar the odd word here and there, is in Japanese. All the writing in the album is in Japanese. Everything on their website is in Japanese. All the stuff you can go and research about them is in Japanese. So we agreed that track 5 was the classic. Simon did a great job on that, because then you can find out basically nothing about them. And then we reconvened a couple of months later with a part 2. And I gave Simon the Ginger Wildheart album, World of Filth, where Ginger Wildheart went under the name of Howling Willie, and the last word rhymes with Dunt. That's all I'm going to say. And every song on the album is utterly profane. I mean, the song titles, the chorus is, I mean, the polite one that I remember is a little bit of gravy helps the dog lick your balls. That's the polite one. And Simon somehow managed to describe this album and discuss it.
Has John Paul got anything to do with that album?
Yeah, John Pool's there somewhere. Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, it sounds like John Paul would be at the bottom of something like that.
Yeah, why would you ever think that, a random John Pool? So yeah, those two still rank as the ones that I'd sat and I laughed all the way through, and then I must admit I did watch them again and laughed all the way through again.
So you can just imagine how much I laughed during those episodes. I think that's all I did was laugh. Yeah, those are great. Those are great. All right, Simon, what do you got?
Yes. I like moments. I also quite like to create moments. And I also like other people's misery, specifically Stephen's misery. So Stephen's barbecue was just fantastic.
That was a great story.
So pleased that didn't happen to me. I couldn't wish it to happen to anybody else who gave me Japanese shit to try and talk about. So pleased by that. Yeah. Times getting left in Glasgow and all that. I really enjoy that kind of stuff. I'll say moments. Just I just can't even see or hear the word growler anymore. I just nope, just nope. And in every episode, I always want at some point Pete to do this. Yeah. Because he does it practically. Yeah, don't like, yeah. That just makes me so happy. Yeah. Yeah, I don't know where my Kermit is tonight, but that was the same thing, wasn't it? Yeah. Yonica. I just like to hear Stephen say that. I'd like it as my Yonica. Yeah. And that wasn't a fun evening for you either, was it?
No, Yonica. Oh no, that one. No. Don't shut the merch when I'm in the queue. Don't do that. Don't do that.
They kicked you out, didn't they?
Yes. Yeah. I don't get antsy with people. I did that night. Don't do that.
No. I also enjoyed the bottom core section. I didn't enjoy the listening period. You know, and we've discussed this off air, haven't we, Stephen? We do listen to everything. Even if it's only once, we listen to absolutely everything. And there's some absolute shite in the bottom end of that discography. There's some really bad stuff, is there not? But the other thing I really like to do, apart from Bob Catleyhands, is to delve into the live chat when things are on. I do that almost religiously. It's just so much fun. There's so many kind and thoughtful people there, and some people slightly less kind and thoughtful. Yeah, one guy checked out after 5 minutes the other day because of the beer. Oh, fucking hell. Really? Okay, but that's where I'm at my happiest. Although people do think that I watch along. Absolutely don't. I've never watched a whole episode back. That would be terrifying. Although I did check, and here's a fun fact: John Parr has got soft hands, not smooth, soft hands. I found it today and checked it out. Soft hands. So,
how did you find that out, Simon?
Well, if only there was an episode you could go back and look at, Andy. Yes.
Well, it's safe to say that John is still alive and well, but in Simon's cupboard.
Yes. And the favourites are absolute. I will show up in a second. Favourite, absolute best episode. I think we can all agree, all the three of us, is this Saturday's Y&T one that's coming out very soon. It's just a fantastic hour on Earthshaker.
Oh,
right.
Brilliant.
Great way to plug the new episode. I love it.
It's just it's our best episode. Yeah, it's our Born Again. It's our
yeah, terrific album.
Yes.
I'm so happy you mentioned the John Parr episode, because that was one of my favorites. I don't think I ever laughed so hard on this channel as I did that day. So what was that episode? Because I think Andy and Phil both need to watch that one. Which one? What was the theme of that episode? I don't remember.
I think it was Constant Experiences 2005 to 2009, and that was 2007.
Okay,
James Christian's wig gets a bit of a kick in as well, doesn't it?
What wig?
You suggested came in a box. That one.
Well, it has to look after it. Come on now.
The one that you said has its own rider. That one.
Our favorite concerts 2005 and 2009. That's the one.
Okay.
Okay. All right. I will put the link in our little chat on Facebook so you guys can check it. It's absolutely hilarious. Absolutely hilarious. Yeah, that was from a year and a half ago, something like that. Yeah, that was a good one. In fact, it's what's so funny about some of the episodes that three of us do together on the UK Connection is we will mention little bits and things from prior episodes in other episodes about things that we talked about on episodes from a year or two ago. And then we laugh, we talk about it, we drop it in, and then we stop and think. It's like, well, for someone who's only been following the show for a couple months, they probably have no clue what we're talking about, right? And it's, but who cares, right? Because those who have been, they remember all this stuff. So that's always fun. It's always fun. All right, Andy, what do you got?
Well, you've got me ranking all my favorite sort of legendary jazz fusion musicians over the years. The Stanley Clarke was hard because of all those albums. The difficult one was the Tony Williams one.
Yeah.
You know, because it was just such a strange spread of stuff. But I think my favorite one was the Miles Davis, where we looked at the sort of electric P at Miles Davis. And if you go and look back at that video, which we did with Chuck Alvarez, when you go back and look at that video, it's an hour and 40 minutes long, and it's not because it's a lot of albums. It's because we really just enjoyed it. You can see it, you know, there was just so much to talk about, you know, there was so much love for those albums, you know, so I think that's been my favorite one, you know, and I think it was a shock to us when we got to the end and saw how long it was, you know, but I like a long video.
It's funny because when I did the last episode of this series a week or so ago, and Chuck was on that one, and he was talking about some of his favorite episodes, that one came up, and I said to Chuck, I said, do you remember after we got done with that episode and I turned off the record button, we were like at over an hour and a half, and I turned off the record button, and we all looked at each other on the Zoom, and we were like, wow, that was great.
Yeah,
like,
we had
really struck gold in that, you know, because you know when there's a great conversation that just happened, and the exchange of ideas and love and passion for the music and albums we're talking about really comes through, and it absolutely did on that show. I mean, I was amazed at how well that one came out. It was almost like a Herculean task, right? We were like, you know, how are we actually going to kind of grip this one here? And
yeah, well, we thought it was going to be quite difficult, didn't we? But it actually just went, you know. And I think, see, I find George Lammy quite scary, because there's the deadpan thing, and then there's the knowledge as well, because there's nothing going on that he doesn't know about, you know, really. You know what I mean? If Scott Henderson scratches his arse, he knows that he's got it, the bootleg of it. So, and I find that quite scary, because you know his knowledge. But with Chuck just can go anywhere. He seems to be able to go to any style of music and know about it. And I love that, how open he is to all this different stuff. He just loves music, and it's like, so you can bring up, you know, like punk bands, electronic bands, and Chuck's just there. And I find that, because I find these conversations interesting, you know, I love to talk about music, and I love when it all goes all over the place. I think that's the thing with that Miles Davis one, wasn't it? You know,
yeah,
covered a lot of ground.
Yeah, that was good. The Weather Report one was good too. Yeah. And
Yeah,
Steve, you
band.
did one with Chuck too, on
Cardiacs.
the Cardiacs. That's right.
Yeah, no, not the Cardiacs. Somebody will be annoyed.
Cardiacs.
Cardiacs.
That was a brilliant episode, Steve, because there's not that many people who know about Cardiacs. They're one of my favorite bands, and I still, doesn't matter how much I try and delve into the history of them, I can't get to the back of it. There's just too much going on, and too much weirdness, too much obscureness, and you just nailed it. I thought it was brilliant.
Weirdness is the word, both in and out of the band. Everything that's happened, all the music, the way it come together, the way it doesn't. Yeah, weird. But that was great. I really enjoyed doing that with Chuck and yourself, Pete. I know that you were more kind of mediating than anything else, but yeah, that was a really good show. Really enjoyed that one.
It's always fun for me to like put together people who can have those types of discussions. Like, you know, like we did, Simon and Martin Popoff did the Stranglers. We had Martin and Phil and myself did this really cool Deep Purple themed show, right? I mean, it's always fun to do stuff like that, where you can bring people together and just pour into their knowledge pool and come up with some really entertaining viewing. So that's always fun, you know.
And it's always interesting when you think you know somebody's background and what they like, and then suddenly they go, well, I love this band. You go, well, I wouldn't have thought that. You know, I love when that happens. You see that different aspect of somebody.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's what makes doing this channel such a joy for me, right? Is to be able to collaborate with so many cool people who have the same kind of passion as I do for all this music that we love so much, right? And I think it's cool too that, you know, everybody's got different likes and dislikes, right? That always kind of works well. I think if we all like the same shit, it wouldn't work as well. But you know, like Steven and I have done so many collaborations about so many different bands. Same with Simon and Phil and I have this just love for those classic bands of the, you know, like Purple and Sabbath and all these classic bands. And Andy loves the prog and all the fusion stuff like I do. So it's really cool to be able to work with you folks and everybody else here on the channel. It's just for me, it's an absolute joy. So it's kind of
Pete, I think the genius of your channel is the way that you've collected all these disparate music styles together, but they do sort of go together, you know, and nobody's ever thought this. I'm a huge, you know, Sabbath fan, Zeppelin fan, you know, I grew up with all that as well, you know, and I'm a prog fan, a fusion fan, you know, and all that type of thing. And I think it's brilliant how you've been able to bring people from all those different backgrounds, because there is crossovers there. It's so strange, you know.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. So much fun, and we've only scratched the surface. There's so much good stuff yet to come. That's the exciting thing, right? So yeah, so thanks everybody for joining this episode of whatever we call this, remembering our first episodes on SOT. I always forget what the name of this thing is, but we should have one more episode because we still haven't gotten Chris Alla, Lynn Versace, and Stephen Keeler yet. So I'm hoping to grab the three of them over the next week or so, get them together so we can finish off this series. But if you, I have an idea for those of you watching. If you like seeing these four gentlemen on screen together, maybe we can come up with something that we can all collaborate and do a separate show one of these days down the road. So that sounds like fun. Maybe we'll do that. So I'm sure everybody would be open to it. So till then. Visit us on the web at www.seatranquility.org. We're on Facebook, we're on YouTube, all together, all the damn time. Please make sure we got the UK connection coming up this weekend. Like we mentioned, we're going to be doing a ranking the songs on a classic album. That album is Earthshaker by Y&T. We've got Phil will be back on the channel in just a couple of weeks. We'll do our next episode of our songs that define a guitar player. I'm looking forward to having Andy back on the channel whenever we can get him on, because I know he's always into it. And please do check out Andy's channel as well as Phil's channel, Now Spinning Magazine. So lots of good stuff there as always. And we'll see you real soon. For Andy, Simon, Steven, and Phil, I am Pete. Have a good one, everybody. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.
Thank you.